our hydrocarbon, carbonate sand, where we find our hydrocarbon, have their own habitats. And it's always good for us to have a good understanding of that habitat. So which means that sedimentology is key for quantitative seismic evaluation. Sedimentology is key for our any kind of inversion. And if you look at sedimentology, if you look at it from different perspectives, one key area is the area of morphology, geomorphology. The river system have their own architecture. The sea, tidal channels, they have their architecture. So we should be able to mimic this, to see this architecture on seismic, and that way it would reduce uncertainty. Again, I will just run through the simple workflow on interpretation for stochastic inversion. Then we'll do a comparison between deterministic and stochastic inversion. And we'll conclude, take some questions.
Hello, Doc. Sorry,
yes.
Please permit me to obstruct the flow of this presentation. Is it possible to adjust the display, because we're seeing two screens? So if we could, yes, so we're seeing two different screens. Is it possible to go to that display setting up there? There is a show taskbar, there's display setting, there's a drop down there. Yes.
Okay, beautiful.
Yes, let's use duplicate slideshow.
I was wondering too, because I wasn't getting the picture I wanted. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Right?
Sorry for the disruption. All right.
No. I love it. I was struggling before now. You know, I'm an old man.
All right, let me allow you to continue.
You are finally accepted as an old man.
No, I'm an old man, but it depends on the context.
Who is calling my organ old man? Take time, oh.
Okay, fine. So, as we all know, seismic has evolved over the years, from structural interpretation to stratigraphic interpretation to sequence stratigraphy, and then to quantitative interpretation. By and large, each of these approaches has their own inherent limitations. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to integrate different approaches together. So you agree with me that conventional seismic stratigraphic interpretation has their own pitfall. Yes, it has worked in several places. They find them to use it to discover a lot of field, but in some cases too, they have failed. If you are a proponent of sequence stratigraphy, seismic stratigraphy, you agree with me that in deep water, where relative sea level change has a minimal impact on sediment, so it's difficult for you to use that approach to find hydrocarbon. That is why if you look at the Gulf of Guinea, from Nigerian offshore Nigeria down to Senegal, thereabout. Apart from Nigeria, offshore Nigeria, where there have been a lot of exploration and development in the offshore setting, there have not been so many success in the other parts, Dahomey Basin, offshore Ghana. It was recently they just found Jubilee field. You can imagine how many drive holes that have been drilled. So little stratigraphic unit between layers can be missed on seismic. This is true. Seismic events are time bound, and they are not necessarily little stratigraphic. We must carry that in mind. We pick horizons every time. They are all time bounds related to amplitude. In some cases, you have forced seismic onlaps. You know, again, this could be attributed to limited seismic resolution, because you have to consider your tuning thickness. I'm using my seismic to interpret this to map that. The fascia I want to map or I want to interpret, is it thick enough to be seen by seismic? These are some of the inherent challenges. Again, quantitative interpretation of amplitude can help reduce these uncertainties if we use them well. We're not saying that it's going to solve all the problems. It's a panacea. It's not a panacea, but it could help if it is used properly. So again, if you look at the evolution from that seismic stratigraphy era to sequence stratigraphy, now we're talking about AVO, looking at even the way seismic is being acquired. Can we factor that into our interpretation? So that leads to AVO analysis, and then we can carry out inversion on a AVO process seismic. But again, there's a note of warning I want to stand here. Yes, there are a lot of positive stories about AVO inversion. Let's remember that we have to validate whether AVO will work at that particular window. This is strictly tied to rock physics, and what rock physics, as we know, is basin specific, field specific, depth specific, and even window specific. We must be able to establish with our local understanding of the geology whether the responses we're going to see there are what they are supposed to be. Simple relativity modeling and advanced forward modeling should be founded on thorough understanding of local geology and geophysical properties. I had some discussion with some guys yesterday, and I told them that for you to use the QI very well and then reduce uncertainty, you must understand geology. You must make sedimentologists your friends. You must sit down together and understand the processes. You're looking at the physics of the rock. You must understand the rock very, very well before you start applying the physics. So seismic inversion, as we know, has wide application in exploration, appraisal, and even development. But again, we need to know that as a minimum, the standard is that what we do is merely deterministic inversion. Deterministic in the sense that you just have one result, one model, and you go with it. It's basically what you're doing is you're using some mathematical principle of sparse-pack algorithms. And what are the inputs? The inputs are basically your acoustic impedance here, your P impedance, maybe your S impedance, then your shear velocity, primary velocity, then that will give you your VPPS. They are critical for our discussion this morning. Elastic impedance and seismic simultaneous inversion techniques involve lithology and fluid sensitive attributes. They have been widely used and they've been successful. I remember, was it last year or so, I shared a similar presentation on inversion too. We're looking at simultaneous inversion. This is just a different approach now. Today we're looking at a stochastic inversion, or we're going to make a reference to that to deterministic inversion. Why are we doing stochastic inversion? Why are we interested in stochastic inversion? The truth is that on average, any sand body that is less than 50, 60 feet, it might not be resolvable on your seismic. We have inherent challenges in seismic acquisition and parameter setting. So it's not everything you can see. And when we say 50 feet, 60 feet, you're looking at about 5-story, 6-story building because a floor is about 10 feet. And so what happens if your sand bodies are less than that? How do you do it? The old way is you map what you can map, you drill a well. If you find those subseismic sand bodies, you isoco them and you move on. At times when they drill additional wells, infill wells, they could miss them. Maybe they're not that continuous. We want to be sure, and that brings us to stochastic inversion. The beauty of stochastic inversion is that it can resolve team bed, what we call team bed. 12 feet, 15 feet sand could be resolved. It's not magic. It's just applying the same amplitude data that we all know from them. Please, can you mute yourself, please? Don't know where that noise is coming from.
Yes.
Please, can you mute your mic? Then you integrate it with some concept of geostatistics. Here, we're looking at Bayesian statistics, Markov chain, and algorithms. So again, that brings me to the concept of the main concept behind the stochastic inversion, which is the Bayesian statistics. Thomas Bayes, actually is a non-conformist Presbyterian minister in London Church, far back when US was still under the British colony. So when I say somebody is a non-conformist, so you know what it means. So Bayes wrote 2 books, one on theology, religion, the second one on probability. And that second one on probability just aligned with the way Bayes think. And that Bayes way of thinking, which has to do with a lot of guessing, it's what has evolved now to what we call Bayesian probability or Bayesian statistics. Bayesian probability or Bayesian statistical probability has wide application today. It is tricky, but it's not magic. It has been used in other industry. The military uses it a lot. At times when you hear in the developed world, where there's mass arrest, police will just arrest everybody. They are not arrest everybody because all of them are suspect or criminals. They are doing that to gather information. So when they put all that information together, no matter how far they are from the truth, when they subject them to Bayesian way of thinking, finally, it always leads to the truth. So we are going to simplify the Bayesian statistics to a point where even a market woman will understand what we're talking about. Now, why is it important for us to hold this kind of discussion? Again, like I said earlier on, thin beds below 15 feet are difficult to be resolved on seismic. So below 50 feet are difficult to be resolved on seismic. Talk of 12 feet, 10 feet. Macro sedimentary features is good for us to map them on seismic. What I mean micro sedimentary features now, I'm looking at your sedimentary environment. You have channels, you have barrier bars, I mean, you have shelf environment, you know. We can actually decipher this on seismic. That's important. They are important because many times we struggle when we want to define the position environment. We want to model our for development in building static model. We struggle. You could just pick well and say, oh, it's finding upward, it's fine, so it's channel. It's not all finding upward that are channels. The only way you can know whether you have a channel is when you're able to map it on seismic, or if you can reconstruct the geomorphology on seismic. Again, we'll talk about AVO. AVO has its own limitation. If I have gas, live gas saturation, if I have residual gas, am I going to get the same response? Could I go and recommend that a well should be drilled even when the response I'm seeing is due to residual gas? How do I discriminate between residual gas and live gas saturation? These are big challenges that are facing geoscientists like you and I. So the focus of our talk this morning is to highlight the benefit of stochastic inversion over deterministic that is common. When you do your p-impedance inversion, your structure inversion, it's deterministic. When you do your pre-stack inversion, it's deterministic. When you do elastic impedance, it's deterministic. When you do a standard elastic impedance, it's deterministic. We'll say, okay, why don't you bring in some stochastic inversion? Look at other possibilities, 100 possibilities of that inversion. The one that will be true, the one that will not be true. Let's look at everything together. So, like I said earlier on, this is going to be the key focus. One, I will try and give a theoretical overview of deterministic inversion and stochastic inversion. I will show a simple workflow for stochastic inversion. Then I will guide all of us through seismic geomorphology and litho fluid prediction using a geostatistical inversion. Again, at the end of my talk, we'll be open because it's all learning. All of us are going to learn from each other. I want to learn from you guys too. Like I said earlier on, I'm getting older, but I hold the NAPI YP that high in my mind and in my life. So getting older means that in a short while, maybe the next 15, 20 years, I would have retired. So when I retired, I will still fall back on you guys to put food on my table. So he can. I mean, let's get this man. He can work with us in the same team. So let's introduce a little bit of a Markov chain. You know, again, don't forget Bayesian probability, Markov chain, and Monte Carlo stimulation. They are all languages now that are used in programming. These are used in machine learning. That's why that's a presentation I did some time ago in Nape Technical in Lagos, when there were these views about artificial intelligence, big data. I said, but we've been using this in geosciences for I mean, over a century. So it's not new to us. But again, they are opening the horizon for every other discipline and the whole of mankind. So when we are looking at Markov chain, Monte Carlo simulation, what are we trying to do? We are trying to approximate posterior distribution of parameters of interest through random sampling. So a parameter of interest is just a number that summarizes a phenomenon that we're interested in. It can be anything, it can be any attribute. And so when we talk about distribution now, we're talking about mathematical representation of possible values. Let's assume that you're looking at the height of individuals in a state. And then you go and take the height of individuals. You have the ones that will fall to the very low end. You can have the one that will fall in the very high end, very tall individuals. But a whole number of people will fall in the middle. So like example, if I ask you what is the average height of an able man in Nigeria, you see it's going to be around 170, 175 centimeters. That does not mean that you know how people that are taller than that and people that are shorter than that. So one way of looking at this kind of information is to do a Markov chain and Monte Carlo simulation. Now, instead of just representing the values of a parameter and how likely each one is to be the true value, we can think like Bayes. And Bayes is all about guessing. We guess. What if this is this? What if this is that? In Bayesian statistics, the distribution representing our belief about a parameter is called a prior distribution. It's called a prior distribution. You know, you can go to a state, or for example, people that have not been to Nigeria before, the belief they have about Nigeria is that Nigeria is a very hot country. Once you get to Nigeria, you'll be kidnapped. That is the prior belief they have. So when we are doing a stochastic inversion, the algorithms actually use this kind of prior understanding. And don't forget, in geoscience, we say that you move from what known to the unknown. It doesn't mean whether that known is correct or not, but you have to start from somewhere. So the key to Bayesian analysis is to combine that prior understanding, the likelihood that is going to be true or wrong, to now determine what is supposed to be afterward. So I have a simple example here, very simple example to illustrate that. Imagine, you know, these days, guys split their hair, ladies split their hair, ladies use earring, guys use earrings. It's common these days. Imagine you are in our airport, you know, and you have this beautiful human being, you know, few meters away from you, and then the phone just fell down. The person didn't know. You pick up the phone, you want to be polite. So you say, excuse me, madam. Excuse me, madam. Because you're behind. And based on the grade you're seeing, you feel that that person is a lady. Say, excuse me, madam. The question is that what is the probability that that person wearing that braid is a woman? That is how the Bayesian statistics works, and that is how it's been applied in stochastic inversion. Yeah, so the first thing you would do is to make some assumption. One of the assumptions, okay, let's say you are looking at 100 persons, 100 women in the airport lounge. You say, okay, what if 50 of them are wearing braids? What if 50 are not wearing braids? So you can find the probability of any person wearing a braid being a woman. Okay, you imagine, okay, that we have 100 men in the airport. 96 of them are wearing no braids. 4 of them are wearing braids. Because from your prior knowledge, men doesn't braid their hair that much in this part of the world. So you can calculate the probability of the person being a man, person wearing that braid being a man. But that picture will change if the foam fell when you are close to a male restroom. In the male restroom, you will not expect to have plenty female. You expect to have only male. And so you assume that, okay, I have 100 men. No, I have about 8, I have about 8 men. 84 of them have no braid. 4 of them have braid. So based on this, now you can compute your probability. And then you are saying this because you have 28 men, or you feel that probably you have 2 women too in that corner. Maybe they are waiting for their partner. So if you have 2 women in that close to that main restroom, you first of all you assume, okay, let's say one of them has braid. Let's say one of them does not have braid. You can come up with a probability. So I have another case here. I have 100 people in the whole of the airport. As assume, let's say 50 is women, 50 is men. So for the 50 that are women, let's say 25 of them are wearing braid. Let's say 25 are not wearing braid. So probability of someone wearing the braid being a woman is now 50%. If I go to that side, let's say 50 men, 48 are not wearing braid, only 2 are wearing braid. This is an assumption. So that will give me probability of that person wearing braid. I say, excuse me, man, being a man is 4%. So, and that brings me to this equation. This is what we call the Bayesian equation. It's a conditional probability. Probability of A if B is true. That's conditional probability. And then you have the joint probability, combining probability of B giving A and the probability of A. And you have probability of B, which is more like the marginal probability. So this is what it means, if you can see my graph. First of all, there's a prior belief. First of all, then there's an evidence, which is the likelihood of that happening. If you combine these together, you now come up with your posterior belief, which is your probability. And that is why when we do stochastic inversion, we'll do several realizations. I bring in another typical example here again, just to drive home. We're not solving maths here, we're just looking at it. Now, to keep it simple, I have this fellow. This fellow consulted his doctor or her doctor. The fellow has a weight of 70 kg. And then the doctor said, you have 60% of being obese. You know, they have a mild way of communicating to you. The doctor doesn't want to body shame you. So he doesn't want to tell you that you're obese. Because if you look at the body mass index, that's a window you fall, you know that your health is at risk. So doctors will advise you maybe to go and register in a gym and start a workout program. And again, not just to have people that can be overweight, we can have people that will be underweight too. If you're underweight too, it's a problem. So in this case, the doctor said, sir, your weight is 70 kg. That's when you go to hospital, they do your vitals. This is part of the reason why they do your vitals. He said you have 60% chance of being obese. You need to start up some program. You need to cut down your weight to 60. That's your ideal weight. And so you go and start a exercise program. Let's look at it here now. First of all, the weight we know is 70. The doctor wants you to cut down to 60. That's another value. If you add that together, 70, 60, it gives you 130. Now we're going to find the probability of each of these. So probability of the person weighing 60, when we know that the original weight is 70, is 60 over 130. That will give us 0.5, about 54. Then we look at what we call the prior knowledge or prior distribution. Doctor already said that this person has 60% chance of being obese. That's 0.6 as probability. Then we look at the probability of 60, that gives 0.46. If you combine that in this equation, likelihood times trial all over evidence, you're going to have 70%. So what this means is that when this person starts to work out, maybe after 2 weeks or so, there is 70% probability that the person will weigh 60%, 60. That is to say that probably the person would have reduced like 7 kg, and the person now will be weighing like 63, 62. You see how bias statistics had helped us to predict what we don't know beforehand. So assume that you have another fellow that is weighing about 70 kg as well. And then this is the doctor's verdict. He said, you have 10% chance of being obese. It means that person is far from being obese. It means that person is fit. It means that you don't have enough fat in that person's body to be born. Again, let's say these two guys are friends. One say, I'm targeting 60. This one say, let me target 60. Don't forget, the a priori probability here is 0.1, which is just 10%. If you solve that Bayesian equation again, you're going to have 0.12, which is 12%. So it means that even if this guy trained the same, put the same energy like the one that was obese, the chance of the person reducing his weight to 60 will be very, very slim. It's almost impossible. Highest, we just dropped down to 68, 67. So now that we've have a clear understanding, I don't know, I mean, not of how we can use the bias guessing approach, so to say, to predict values. So we'll now combine it with Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation. Like we all know, when we say Monte Carlo simulation, you're just looking at different realization. What comes into mind is that you still have to use your variogram. So in the yellow box, those are my sample points. Then the green is where I want to do prediction. So unlike a deterministic algorithm, in this case now, the algorithm is going to use random points, random path to predict. You can predict the box to the far left, or you can start from the one from the far right. It will mix different order, maybe 100 orders. And then the Markov chain help that every grid must to be populated sequentially. And once you do this, you have several realizations. So you cannot take what you think that is the mean of that whole distribution. Have you looked at some theories, simplistic theory around the Bayesian statistics, how it can be integrated with a Markov chain and Monte Carlo simulation? It would be nice for us to understand the environment. We're not going to spend much time here to talk about different environment, but again, you know that when you move from the continent to deep waters, you meet a lot of rivers, your fluvial system, from where the river is straight to where the river becomes a meander, you have some little bit of deposition, where you have some sandbars, point bars, and then you get towards the basin, you have this rotational system, depending on the volume of sand in the delta. And then this is distributed to form your your beach sand, you have your barrier bars, you begin to look at your surface deposits, sand deposits. And then you move down to the shelf. In open shelf, it's marine, you have a lot of shells. When you still have sand and find your way, maybe through hyperpicnic flow, and even turbidity currents. Then you go down to the deep water setting, so that's different environment. So when we understand this different environment, we know that the architecture of the sand that is in the deposit in this different environment, they are different. So if I've seen a point bar deposit before in a river, so if I'm interpreting my seismic or I'm doing an inversion, if I see what looks like a point bar, I will know. If I see what looks like a crevasse plane, I should know. If I see what looks like a turbidite fan, I should know. So you might be a classical geophysicist, but that means that you need to have friends or your team members that are very, very good in sedimentology, that you can work together. So at this point, I just want to give an insight into the workflow or methodology. Don't forget, the key here is that you need your well data. You have to do 1D rock physics analysis on your well data. That is what you know. You will need your pre-start seismic data, partial angle stats, and even full. You must understand the geology. There must be a geologic framework on which your inversion is dependent on. If you miss out that geologic framework, that is the reason why most people drill dry wells. That's the reason why most people will not be able to resolve subsurface uncertainty. This one has nothing to do with whether you have worked for 30 years or 40 years, or whether you just started, you just joined the industry. This is physics. And they say physics does not respect anybody. It's based on observation, natural laws and observation. You observe, you relate it to known basic principles. So as a step, whether it's deterministic or stochastic, it's always good to do AVO analysis. AVO is something as AVA. AVO, amplitude variation with offset. AVA, amplitude variation with angle. That offset is something as angle. So you do analysis and see how your amplitude varies as your offset distance increases or as the angle increases. You see the beauty of pre-stack data, because you try to account for the way seismic is acquired. In our post-stack data, even though seismic is acquired with respect to angle, reflection, incidence reflection, during processing, they process it as if the angle of incidence is at what? 0 degrees. And so reflection is going to take place at 0 degrees. That way you lose all information that has to do with sharing, the shear force, the shear impedance. You lose all that information. Yes, we can use that kind of seismic data to map structure, interpret horizon, and all that. Maybe do some simple genetic inversion, but there's limitation to what you can get. So again, by just looking at your angle gathers, angle stacks from near to far, there's a lot you can come up with, and you just keep taking your note. You may want to go to do some intercept and gradient analysis. You do your intercept and gradient plot to tell whether you are going to have hydrocarbon in that field or not. Is it class 1, class 2, class 3, or class 4? But basically, your fluid factor, as in your hydrocarbon, will not plot in the same quadrant with non-hydrocarbon streaks and even water. So that is key. Well, for purpose of a stochastic inversion, we move to building a model, a certain model. You may want to build it from stochastic. Please, can you mute yourself? So you build your initial model, you update that model, you define little fishes, because you must start from somewhere, you must start from prior knowledge. So those concepts of bioscience we have been explaining that time now is coming out plain now. So how do you do that? normally, when you do your inversion, you come up with P impedance, S impedance, you come up with VP-VS ratio. You have a density model. With P impedance and VP-VS ratio, you can do a cross plot. Start from the well first, and when you do that cross plot, you discover that there are different clusters. Some clusters will correspond to wet sand. Some clusters will correspond to gas sand. Some clusters will correspond to oil sand. Some clusters will correspond to carbonate. Some clusters will correspond to shale. If you filter this, you can see where they fall on your log. So the same thing can be carried to seismic. So when you do that, you now build a lithophacy classification based on that cluster analysis of your P impedance, VPVS, or any other attributes. Once that has been done, so it means that hello? Hello?
Yeah, we're with you, sir. We're with you.
Okay, I just want to be sure. So those clusters you have built, those spatial classifications you have built, well, if you look at your log, you see that, oh, this sand is associated with high impedance, low VPVS, for example. This one is high impedance, high VPVS, and you can match it with your seismic response. Once that has been done, the next thing is for you to do the Bayesian statistical analysis. What is it going to do? It's going to take the probability of sand occurring at any part in your seismic volume. When I mean sand now, your wet sand, your gas sand, your oil sand, your shale, it's going to assign probability to them. This now becomes what? The prior probability. So when you match that, solve that equation we solved earlier on, integrate it with a multi-calorie simulation, you now have equiprobable realization, several realizations. You can take the mean of that realization. You can take any percentile of that realization, and then now continue to work with that model. Again, it will help you to discriminate your fluid. We will take starter slices. When you take your starter slices, you'll be able to see the different actual elements and marry them to modern day and ancient sedimentary analog. You might take it a step further if you want to even begin to predict other properties, V-shale, saturation, porosity from seismic volume. So let's start with this simple AV analysis. Here I derive different partial angle stacks, 5 to 11. I have in my full stack. I decouple them. I have 5 to 11, 11 to 6 degrees, 16 to 20, 22 degrees, until 44 to 49, which is my ultra far. I begin to look at it. What am I seeing? So in that case too, I can do the same thing on my well and look at the different angles on my well. Now, I guess this slide will show you, explain it very well. So here I have angles from 0 to 20, and I have amplitude on my y-axis. You can see how your wet sand and gas sand are plotting. From a little below 10 degrees up to 20 degrees, you see that you are unable to differentiate between your gas sand, even your residual and wet sand. But as you move towards the very high angle, you begin to see clear separation. What does it tell you? Here, this is based on frequency. At higher angle, you are going to have more of your shear signals and have low of your primary wave. But then you have low frequency primary wave components, and that's a high angle. And when you have low frequency component, they cause a kind of friction once you have small gas within the formation, and that's why you see that wide separation. So this simple qualitative analysis is very, very important. It's very, very beneficial. It's of much value when you're screening through your seismic data. Just do partial angle stacks and run them, and you see what happens. So, and this is the reason why when you look at your near angle and you look at the far angle, once there's amplitude amplification on the far angle, it means it's indicative of hydrocarbon in most of the cases. So this is what we have done here. Take the near 5 to 10, 11 degrees, extract amplitude on the area of the horizon of interest, do the same thing at 22 to 27 degrees, do the same thing at 28 to 24 degrees. So you see that clearly on the far angle stack, you can see that high amplitude, which you don't see on the near. And this is the reason at times when we work with post-stack data, it causes a lot of argument. If you like, blend everything in the edge. Someone will tell me, say, I can blend this attribute with this one, with this one, with this one. Whether you can blend though, the underlying angular effects on your amplitude response has been smeared. And that's why when doing processing, we say when you're processing for AVU, make sure you preserve the amplitude. That should be true amplitude recovery. Because once that is messed up with, what is garbage in, garbage out, your result is as good as yours. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that some other person would have done this work before, use only post-stack data, and so what they're going to get is going to be close to the 5 to 11 degree, and say, I cannot see any DHR here. And we say, what they mean is, can you give us your, do you have a post-stack data? Can we have the angle stacks? And we'll do this simple analysis. We say, it appears there's hydrocarbon. We have a good response there. It's just understanding the physics and understanding the rocks and putting them together. Overall, like a refresher, whether you're doing a deterministic or you're doing a stochastic, like I said, it's always advisable to do this qualitative check or analysis on your partial angle stack. A whole lot of information you're going to get. And after that, what do? You load the well, you extract your angles on the well, and then you build your model. When you build your model, you do your inversion, and you're going to have what? Your low P impedance, you're going to have your S impedance, you're going to have a VPVS, you're going to have a density. And once you have P impedance, S impedance, VPVS, you can now generate other derivatives like your mu rho, your lambda rho. Mu rhos and lambda rho, I like them so much, they're very good because they are just geology. Lambda rho, mu rho is just the sedimentology. Once you understand it, what you cannot see in your impedance, what you cannot see in your VPVS, you will see it in a mu rho, lambda rho. Mu rho is lithology sensitive. I'll not go into that details now, but what I mean is that your grain size variation, your sorting, the porosity, the matrix type, all of them are sensitive to this mu rho attribute. And then for your fluid is your lambda rho. So this is just about 4 words in this involved in this study. This is just showing about 3 of the wells. You have a gamma ray, you have porosity, you have lambda rho, and mu rho. What we're trying to relate here is to relate the mu rho and lambda rho response to porous sand units. So here, like I said, you in your inversion, that's simultaneous or independent inversion, you have your P impedance, S impedance separately, you have your VPVS. So when you do the derivative of BPBS, you're going to have your mu rho, you're going to have your lambda rho. And here I've added a composite. So if you look at the mu rho, which is lithology sensitive, you can see a blue outline, a blue area penetrated by this well A. That blue area, you see that it has the morphology of a river, a channel. If you go over to the lambda rho slide, you don't see that outline anymore. But what you see, you just see a patchy yellow outline. This patchy yellow outline is just showing that you have this is a gas saturated sand or a carbon saturated sand. So if you do a composite, combine them together, you can see that you're dealing with a point bar. And you can see the limit of the hydrocarbon charge. So it's always good to look at your data in different perspectives, different dimensions. Probably if you look at only the vertical section alone, it might not give you all the information, but look at what we are seeing. You cannot beat this. So having looked at that, let's equally look at our stochastic inversion. The same thing, it's the same input data you're using, no different. The only thing in stochastic inversion is that you have now added somewhat statistics inside. So again, the same process holds true. The only thing here is that you want to define the geologic framework. How do you do that? When we are doing inversion, we just sample it every 4 milliseconds. We just sample your thing 4 milliseconds. But when you are doing between the horizon we have mapped, but when we are doing stochastic inversion, even within the horizon we have maps, we'll slice those to the horizon again into smaller layers. Just like when you're doing static modeling and you have a zone and you divide the zone into layers. So the same thing here, you can divide your thing into more layers so that they give you final resolution. And then you sample at 1 millisecond. Instead of 4 milliseconds, you sample your seismic information at every 1 millisecond. And then using your inline spacing and cross-line spacing. So once you do that, you generate equally probable realizations because you're going to subject it to what? Multi-color simulation. Can choose that 100 realization. So when you do that 100 realization, you put them in a probability distribution plot. So you can take the mean. So this is the product I'm going to show you a simple example. The one to my left here is the deterministic inversion model. So you see that how I will put the gamma ray on it. So you see that the low gamma ray, which is supposed to be your sand, is corresponding to what? Low everything here. Again, one thing that's clear here is that this deterministic inversion model looks very smooth and coarse. So you see that if you have final details you're looking for, you might not be able to see them. Compare that to the stochastic inversion. And stochastic inversion, you can see how fine it is. It's looking rough with final resolution. And that's why I say that you can use stochastic inversion to resolve thin beds that ordinarily your deterministic inversion will not give you. You know, the mistake people always make is that they think that because you've done inversion, that it's going to resolve a thin bed. No, it's not going to resolve thin bed. It is only when you go into stochastic inversion phase that you can resolve a thin bed. And that combines geostatistics with your inversion algorithms. Okay. This is just a typical example I've taken somewhere. So you have a cross plot window. On the right, you have VS, rho, acoustic impedance, shear impedance, VPVS ratio. On the x-axis, I have the VP, the VS, I have the rho. So when you plot different attributes, this is what you're going to see. You're going to have different clusters. At times, those clusters are not going to be very, very separated. That's another thing we need to look at. And that's the beauty of seismic inversion. So, but if I filter these different subtle clusters, they will correspond to these different fascists I have here. I have the shale in green, you have the volcanic in light green, light red, you have the brine in blue, and you have the gas in dark red. This is another example again, where I'm looking at my near and far stack, and then I do a cross plot here. On a cross plot, I can see different fascists. So if I integrate it together, I can express the probability of finding a particular fascist anywhere between the seismic. So again, here, what we're trying to show here is how the result of your stochastic compares with the well, and the result of your deterministic compares with the well. If I see the track where I call it deterministic, the blue is coming from the inversion. The light red is coming from your model, this lambda rho. You can see that, yes, even though the trend of the inversion and the well are following each other, there's a lot of final resolution from the well that the inversion was not able to pick, because your sampling rate first is 4 milliseconds, which is more coarser than the resolution of the well. So what the well is seeing, those thin beds that the well is seeing, because don't forget, thin bed to a geophysicist is different from thin bed to a geologist. It's different from thin beds to a petrophysicist. You're looking at laminar set, bed set, parasequence set, and then you go to the sequence. On seismic scale, what you can see is your sequence and maybe your parasequences. No, it might not even be good to see parasequences from seismic point of view. It's the sequences, your third order sequences. But the segmentologist is able to see to finer scales, even up to laminar. You can see it on core. On lower, you can see beds. And for him, 10 feet is not a thin bed. But from a geophysical point of view, 10 feet, 20 feet is thin bed because it's below seismic resolution. But if you see the beauty of it in stochastic track here is that you see that because of the final resolution, your inversion is almost mimicking your well. So we're almost winding down now. So this is a comparison of, well, how do I remove this thing now? Okay. So this is a comparison of a set of slides from deterministic, another set of slides from inversion. If you look at the set of slides from deterministic, composite slide anyway, you see the channel, and then see the gas sand. Of course, it was only this well that penetrated it. You see, surprisingly, I didn't have the map here. On this field, these 4 wells actually targeted the crest of the structure. But 3 of the wells didn't find the sand. It was only well A that found the sand, because if well A, but what you had was a combination of both structure and stratigraphy. And probably the focus then was structure. And so only well A was inside the sand, the channel sand. So you can see on the deterministic case that the resolution, it was very smooth, it created a kind of smoothing. But if you look at the deterministic stochastic case, it's a bit rough because of the fine details. It's not as smooth as what you find in deterministic. But the truth is that you are able to see more, resolve more on the stochastic. I have a polygon just by the right part of central right part of the 2 displays. There's a small channel there, and you see the sand. You see that there's more of this. The sand extent is greater in the stochastic version than in the deterministic version. Probably the sand is getting thinner towards that end, and so the deterministic was not able to pick it up. So this is just taking cross sections of the model. Deterministic case of lambda rho above, you can see the lower lambda rho that correspond to the hydrocarbon, and where it terminates, we assume to be the gas-water contact. For the stochastic case, you almost have the same picture. Well, there are final resolution. There are details that are picked here that they were not in the deterministic version. Here also I have my Muro, and then I have a V-shell that was modeled from that Muro. Here I have a lambda rho, which has to do with fluid. Then I have a saturation that was modeled for that lambda rho. Don't forget, because it's stochastic, we have several realizations. This is mean of 50 realization. What we are showing here is mean of 50 realization. If you take the 9 percentile, the 98th percentile or 10th percentile of the 50 realization, is not giving you this picture. You're taking the mean because it's more like an average. It's closer to the truth. So putting everything together, you can see how we have combined the composite of Muro, lambda rho, and how it has helped us to delineate not only the lithology within the channel, but also the extent of the hydrocarbon. Just to talk a little about on geomorphology. So you can see this satellite imagery to my left here. You see the river extent, see some point bars around. And then when you look at the morphology of what you have on your seismic, obviously this is pointing toward a channel system. So it gives you, it puts you in a comfortable way to complete your evaluation when you understand the depositional environment by way of looking at macro sedimentary features this way. Again, it's looking simple, but it takes a whole lot of work to be able to bring out this picture. And until you see you're able to come up with this picture, you can't solve whatever challenge you have in developing this field. So these are other examples. I just picked randomly from Jonas. You see meander patterns here and there. If you look at the impedance and DP ratio to my right, obviously you agree with me that the environment here is different from the environment to the left. So what you have here is more like a ponded fascia. Could it be that you are in a lagoon, or could it be that you are in a shelf environment? That's what this is telling us. Okay, let's look at the major differences between deterministic and stochastic, or let's do a comparison. In terms of parameters, are they different? That's how it's known. For deterministic, you need acoustic impedance, both P impedance and S impedance. You need VVS, density, Muro, and lambda, and other derivatives. The same thing for stochastic. What is the main algorithm for deterministic inversion? Sparse spike inversion, unless you want to use model inversion, all of them. What is the main algorithm for stochastic inversion? It's Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation with your Bayesian probability. Input data, full and partial angle stacks for both cases. Input wave data, yes, angle-dependent wavelength estimation using low frequency model. Because your Yeah, yeah. And then on stochastic, angle-dependent wavelength estimation, use statistical information. By instance, statistics, that is the difference. Structural framework, structural and stratigraphic framework. You just have one framework, which is for the low frequency model you build from the well, finish. But in case of the stochastic inversion, it requires a framework that you populate for inversion. And so, like I said before, you have to create as many layers as you have in between the horizon that have been interpreted, based on how fine you want the resolution to be. Knowing fully well that the sampling interval is going to be what? 1 millisecond. Major benefits of deterministic inversion and that of stochastic inversion. Deterministic inversion is low cost, is reliable. You have reliable results that you can see in map view, fluid, lithology, and all the rest attributes. The key difference from stochastic inversion is that stochastic inversion will give you what? Higher resolution. It's going to give you a higher resolution. It's going to image thin bed. In some cases, you can use various realization from stochastic inversion to constrain your static modeling. You know, when you work, you can work with some engineers, they will say, I need 50 realization, 10 realization of your porosity. And this is also realization of your this thing. You can use a stochastic result to constrain that. One of the major disadvantages of deterministic inversion is that the vertical resolution is poor. It will smoothen up, it will smooth up your data. And so you're able to do finer scale. Again, if you compare that with stochastic tends to give you a better picture of your stratigraphy. It replicates the geology better. You know, when we do inversion, we say we're replicating the geology in inversion. So I'm saying that stochastic inversion replicates the geology better than your. So we're almost there. The Bayesian statistics, which is the engine room of stochastic inversion. We're almost done, so you ask your question. Because I can see somebody is raising his hand. The Bayesian statistics, which is the core of stochastic inversion, is all about belief. It's all about belief. I've had several stories about young girls and fairy tale stories and the genies. You know, it's all about belief. At times, these children take those beliefs to heart, just like a small child in school. Depending on whether the teacher has more influence on the child or the parents have more influence on the child, they can argue that their belief to any point. Believe. So first thing when you're looking at all these things, that believe the impossible at least a little. Do not throw away anything. That's how we do more, a lot of realization. Look at all the possibilities. So according to Sherlock Holmes, say when you have excluded the impossible, whatever that remains, however improbable, must be the truth. I take that again. When you have excluded the impossible, whatever that remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So that is what using geostatistics to constrain your inversion does to our evaluation and reservoir characterization. As a way of concluding remarks, these are my remarks as a way of conclusion. Note that stochastic inversion produces higher resolution than the analogous deterministic techniques. It's able to give you thin beds way thinner than 30 feet, 20 feet. Stochastic inversion allows uncertainty to be quantified. This is done through multiple probable realizations. Could it be this? Could it be that? Maybe that. Again, for those of us that build more static models for purpose of reservoir modeling, If you have limited wells in your field, remember that your 2-point statistics, which is based on variogram, need at least 7 sample points for your distribution to be realistic, to be meaningful. I see people who use only 2 wells to build static model. You're just wasting your time. But what I'm trying to say is that the 3D models of petrophysical reservoir properties, including P shale, net to gross, water saturation, porosity, and name them, they can be co-simulated directly from either deterministic or stochastic models to build a static model. This is what we call co-kriging. And that co-kriging, simple co-kriging or collocated co-kriging. So when you have limited well data in your field and you have the benefit of pre-stack data, I would advise you go do that detail and integrate it together to constrain your property distribution, rather than just only 2 wells and 3 wells, and say that you have a robust static model and beat your chest. Finally, fluid and lithosensitive modulus, Muro, lambda rho, shear impedance, they are very, very effective in depicting geomorphological distributional environment, and also to discriminate our gas. You know, from the advent of AVO, gas has been in the focus, but it has evolved now. So if you have high GOR oil, they will give you some appreciable response. But if you have heavy oil, you might not get the kind of fluid discrimination response you desire, both on your simple AVO analysis and even in your inversion models. Yeah, at the beginning of this course, this discussion this morning, in one of those early slides, I highlighted the expectations. One, I wanted to give a theoretical overview of deterministic versus stochastic inversion algorithm. 2, I wanted to show a simple workflow for stochastic inversion. 3, I wanted to guide all of us together how we can use seismic geomorphology and little fluid prediction based on the geostatistical inversion by way of a stochastic inversion. I don't know whether that expectation is met for everyone. So I have read polygon here, meaning that I just wasted all your time. I have amber. You're not there, you're not there. To some extent, you are satisfied. To a larger extent, you're not satisfied. And I have green. You are in sync with me that we have been able to cover the expectation. Otherwise, we can talk offline, or we can reschedule maybe next day and repeat the same course again. We'll review it and I grade it so that we meet everybody's expectation. So I've come to the end of the presentation. I will want to thank you, and I want to take questions. And as that comes, whoever that have the expertise too in the team, in the audience, that want to talk on it, feel free to talk. We are all learning. Me too, there's something I'm going to learn from you guys. Thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doc. Please, a round of applause for Doc for this powerful presentation. So
I can see some hands up.
Call on the, yeah. We'll move into a Q&A section now, and that will be handled by Shem of the technical communication. Shem, over to you.
All right, thank you, Ifeanyi. Please confirm that you can hear me clearly.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you. A big thank you again to Dr. Ebere Bernard. I mean, it's always a pleasure to listen to you speak to us and share knowledge to the YP community. Straight into the question and answer segment. There are 2 options. Well, people are already using the raise hand option. So you can use the raise hand option. You'll be called upon to introduce yourself and then ask your question. And then the second option is to type your question in the chat box. Okay, I can see that David Anomnese David Anamnese's hand has been up. Okay, David, introduce yourself and then you can go ahead with the question.
Okay, good morning. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc, for the wonderful presentation. It's been nice, precise, and I think straight to the point. But I have some questions, just about 2 or 3. The first one is, you talked about the mean of about 50. And I want to know, when you talk about mean of 50 realization, are you saying you're going to collapse the entire 50 realization output into one? Or there's a different algorithm that once you select on that algorithm, it gives you the mean of all the whole realization. It doesn't have to give you 50 different realizations. It just selects all the realization, runs it under the system, then gives you only one output as mean.
Yes, you're correct. That's what it does.
What does it do? Which one does it do? Collapse it and give it to one.
And give you one. It's like an average. Average it and give you.
Okay. I was thinking it's going to give 550 different. Then later
No. It's just one.
Okay. So then the second question is, in a situation where I have a double compaction trend, for instance, where I have an interface of soft sand and hard sand. So I'm having a series of soft sand, hard sand. I've seen a case like that in Niger Delta, soft sand, hard sand, soft sand, hard sand. How do you carry out a successful inversion in such a case? Then the last.
Okay.
You want to answer that one?
Okay, let me just answer it quickly before, Yeah, in that case, don't forget that you need to do the rough physics. The rough physics will already tell you whether you have soft sand and repeating itself and all that. And that is what you're using to constrain the inversion. That is one way to do it. The other way to do it, you can divide the inversion into 2. Invert one part and invert the other part. But otherwise, so long as you have all the necessary information in your 1D model, it's going to be captured in inversion.
Okay. Then the last question is, I don't know if you've thought about integrating genetic inversion in your inversion process. Have you tried it before, and what value do you think it's actually added?
Okay, that's fine. The last time I mentioned in passing, many a times genetic inversion is based on post-hoc data.
Okay.
Yeah, it's based on post-hoc data. So, but we know that post-hoc data, like I explained the other time, they have inherent uncertainty because of the way the data has been processed. You've lost a lot of information. Yes, to an appreciable extent, you can get some good information by doing genetic inversion, but there are a whole lot of important value that you will lose by just restricting yourself to genetic inversion. Again, let me put it this way. It's always good to look at all the approaches. I can start by looking at genetic inversion first on my post-hoc data and all that before I go into deterministic, before I even go into things like extended elastic impedance, before I even now go into stochastic. So I put everything together. So if all of them converge, it means that I'm on the right path. Or where there's a gap from one approach and I can validate that from another one, that's the value that it brings to the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Doc. I think there's a follow-up on Dr. Anamnese's first question, initial question. Okay. Someone was asking, how is that different from deterministic? That's the mean.
Say again, the mean?
How is that different from deterministic, the mean? I think it was Dr. Anamnese's first question, where you said, oh, it computes the mean. So I think that someone is asking, Dr. Chino to George is asking, how is that now different?
It's different from the mean because what has happened is that... Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Don't forget that you have like 50 realization of that one inversion model. Deterministic, when you run deterministic, you just have one inversion model. Now you are doing stochastic and you chose 50 realizations. So you're going to have 50 realization.
Okay.
In that 50 realization, one of them is going to correspond to the mean of the data. Are we there? Out of that 50, one of the models there will correspond to the mean. So for you, that one is likely going to be the most believable. So that is what you're going to use as your base case. But as you're using that as your base case, which is now your mean, you still have the window to decide to use the 60th percentile, the one that corresponds to 60th percentile, or the one that corresponds to 70th percentile, when you want to look at different scenarios now. That is why we say it's a stochastic, because you have more than one result.
More than one. Oh, okay.
It's just like, for example, just like you're building a static model and you're using a stochastic method to produce your properties. So instead of having one static model, you can have up to 10 static models. But you're not going to use those 10 static models to plan your well. You're still going to use one of them to plan your well.
One, yeah.
Even if you want to compute volume, you're not going to use all of them to publish all the volume. You're still going to use one as your base case volume. And that is what the decision is going to be based on.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Doug, for the clarification. Please, before I call on Julius to ask his question, I want to ask this question from, it seems to be like a basic question from Ama Alilu. What is the literal meaning of inversion we have been talking about?
Okay, the literal meaning of inversion is predicting geology from seismic. Predicting geology, that's stratigraphy, your sand, and the fluid from seismic. That's what inversion is all about.
Okay, okay, thanks, Doc. So Julius, please, can you unmute yourself and then introduce yourself and then ask your question?
Okay, thank you very much, Oluwaseun. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julius Adesun. Dr. Bernard, thank you so much. I have a comment and then a question. My comment is at the beginning, you talked about you are getting old, and I'm glad to tell you that being the first runner of QI, you know, just like John the Baptist was the first runner of Jesus Christ, and for Jesus Christ to come later. So be rest assured, you have a whole lot of people coming behind you, and thank you for keeping it simple. So from your presentation, you've demonstrated that the non-uniqueness solution of seismic inversion has confirmed the potent of a stochastic inversion, which also provides the means for you to have a constrained inversion product. And from what you have presented, at least the result has to speak for itself. And also, you have equally demonstrated the relevance of a seismic inversion as a diagnostic tool in geoscience work. And then to my question now, sir, I'm just curious to know what informed the well location for those other wells before the advent of Wesley, which perfectly fit into the Lambda and Monroe result. So I don't know if you have an understanding of what informed those decisions to place those wells. Looking at the seismic geomorphology that you have displayed. Lastly, when you talked about AVO analysis not real successful, you know, in this part of the world, some of, especially the indigenous, when they get on board on new assets being divested from the IOC, most time they don't really know more about what went into the data processing, and then was the data processed with the objective in mind of running AVO at the end of the day. So I guess probably if they can get the raw stack and they go back to reprocess with the mindset of, oh, we're going to run AVO, probably that way change the narrative around AVO being fair. I'm just thinking I might not be totally right. Once again, thank you so much for this high-level presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Julius, and everyone. And like I said before, the floor is open for anybody to contribute. If you feel you want to answer, take over this thing, and that's fine. But again, I go for your first question about the well planning. Yeah, many a times these scenarios, these things always come as afterthoughts. A whole lot of companies, firms, because quantitative seismic is still evolving. if you work with these old dudes, they will tell you they don't believe in all those things. Just give me my map, I will put my well. I don't know whether most of you must have been hearing this from the old dudes. I put my well. It's after they put the well, and the well probably have missed the stand. You know, that is when they will now say, okay, what can we do? And they start calling for experts all over the world to come and solve the problem. So you are right. These 4 wells were planned based on structure. And on structure, those 4 wells targeted the anticline. But when the results started coming, I mean, they had to find out why. And it was obvious that you have a combination of both stratigraphy and structure, and there was overlooked all this while. Recall some time ago, we presented a work similar to this from Seplat, where you have wells on the targeted crest, and some of the wells, even the most crestal wells, were all wet. And then you have other wells at the surrounding having hydrocarbon. That's a work we just did recently with some group, the same scenario. Even my thesis, my PhD thesis, you know, I worked on deep water Niger Delta, little seismic prediction of deep water fishes and reservoir characterization. Again, that is what I observed. Most of the deep water reservoirs, you can find them in Akpo, you can find them in Engina. At least I work on those 2 fields. You can find them in Prowe. If you look at the seismic alone without doing quantitative, what you see with exciting anticline, and you put your wells there. And I think it haunted them a little in the exploration. So again, and that's one of the reasons why you see that apart from the field log that we had in Nigeria, field log and much of hard work in offshore Niger Delta, it moved down to Senegal. There have been a lot of regrets, a lot of dry holes, especially when wells are drilled strictly on structural interpretation. So that is exactly what happened in this case too. So the lesson for all of us is that before we go and put a well, let us do the conventional, traditional structural interpretation. Let us do QI, do all the necessary inversion, not just cherry pick, you know, apply all the things and see which one is going to give us the best answer. I'm saying this from an experience point of view, because early this year, we ran into that kind of scenario. And in the middle of operation, we could not find sand. And what I asked was that, when we were deliberating, I said, wouldn't it have been nice for us to have done all this QI work before we drill the well? So again, like I said, some of those old dudes, most of the work they did was on based on structure. That is the school of thought they believe in. This is your age now. Me, I'm getting old too. This is your time. You guys to make sure that you tick all the boxes when you're doing your analysis and interpretation. No matter how small management want to make it look. Hey, just do this quick work. We don't need this. It's just a quick 3 weeks work. Please ask for enough time and do the thorough job. Where there is gap, get a consultant, form a good team, and synergize together, work as a team, look at every perspective. Don't throw away what the petrophysicist is telling you. Don't throw away what the stratigrapher is telling you. Put everything together until you have a common understanding and a common answer. Otherwise, when the mistake has been done, they'll push it on you. Then for the AVO, like you said, again, they see the same thing. Most of the data that we acquired, they were not tailored towards AVO analysis. So now people are hearing about the wonders of AVO, and then when management sits in meeting, you may not be there, or maybe they went for OTC and somebody presented it from Spain. They say, that is the new technology now, that's the way to go. They will just come and commission a study and say, let's visit so feed, go and do AVO study using that old data that has already been processed wrongly. And probably there's no even plan to reprocess it again. Again, what you get is what you get. It's garbage in, garbage out. So for me, the lesson here, which is something I learned when I was still in university, is that when it comes to seismic acquisition, the person acquiring the seismic must know what the processing geophysicist wants. He must also know what the geologist or the interpreter wants, vice versa. From that beginning, but you agree with me, but when people are planning, they don't even call interpreters. They will just call the consulting company, they will just sign contracts. And they will go and acquire. By the time they have problem now, everybody will now start running here and there. Why didn't we get it? Will the process? You cannot process and perfect what you did not acquire well. So I think that is the only answer I can give around that AVO. But going forward, you guys are coming to the front seat now. You will drive this wherever you're working. You drive it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again for the responses to those questions. Before I call on Taiwo Afuye to ask his question, I want to take one from the chat box. And it's from Adewumi Abdul. He says there are two questions. The first one is, please compare stochastic inversion to frequency decomposition for thin bed delineation. Then the second one is, how do I check if my seismic is a should see DHI seismic data, or how do I know if my seismic is one that will be able to resolve DHIs for me?
Okay.
Yeah, those are
stochastic
the questions.
to frequency decomposition.
Yes.
Yeah, frequency decomposition, that is what we call spectral decomposition. Again, from the onset, spectral decomposition has been based on post-stack data. And like I said, which is the same question the same answer I gave to, what was that one that guy asked? Genetic inversion. Because it is based on post-stack data, there are a lot of valuable information you've already lost. You can't get them anymore. You cannot get them anymore.
Okay.
So what I mean is that your stochastic inversion is still going to have edge over your spectral decomposition. That is on one side. On the other side, this is what I have not tried, but I think it can be a gap or a leading to a new research. What that means is that you can actually do spectral composition on your pre-stack data. And rather than doing it on post-stack data, you do that spectral decomposition on it. You can divide your gathers into different partial stacks, like what we showed at that time, and do spectral decomposition on each of those stacks. When you do spectral composition on each of those stacks, it's going to give you more information than doing it on the traditional way. But one thing that I want to tell you again is that when you do that spectral composition, it will help you to see more of the structure rather than the fluid. So because of that, your stochastic inversion will still have edge over spectral decomposition. Thank you.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
And then what was the last question again?
The second one was, I know at some point you mentioned, I think somehow you've answered that question, but I'll still say it again. It was the question on how do I know if because I know during your presentation you mentioned that there are sometimes that you run your attributes on your seismic and then it doesn't show you anything. You conclude that this seismic doesn't even have any, it's not showing any DHI. How do I check if my seismic is a should see DHI seismic data? How do I know if that seismic data will be able to show me the DHIs that I want?
Okay. The first thing you do is to do a rock physics analysis and modeling. So everything you're doing on seismic, you do on your well. So, but that well must have diposonic, primary sonic and shear sonic. With these two information and your density, you can generate any property you have on seismic. So when you do it on your well, you'll be able to know whether it is diagnostic. That's one part. The other part is you now check the tuning thickness of your seismic. So when you check the tuning thickness of seismic, you look at the sound package you are interested at, and you ask, okay, this sound package, is it as thick as what the seismic is going to see? or is it below the seismic resolution? If it's below seismic resolution, even though on your well you can see it, on seismic you're not going to see it. And that is why you are now going further to now do what? Stochastic, so that you can combine with statistical guess and see even those thin beds.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you so much for the responses to those questions. Our time is fast spent, and if I
Doug, please,
I have a question. I don't know.
Okay.
This time
please hold on, please. Hold on, please. Hello, Doug.
Yes.
Please, you said your last response about having shell and primary logs. In a case where you don't have a shell logs, and there's this empirical equation that you use, how realistic it is in terms of your results.
Yeah, I hear you. You need primary sonic, you need shear sonic, and you need density. If you don't have, and most cases, apart from these days, companies only acquire primary sonic and then use it to tie your check shot. I have tried on my own from the time I've started working. Anytime I drill a well, I make sure we acquire dipole sonic because I know that I'm going to use it for QI. Other people acquire only primary sonic because they're not looking at QI. They're looking at audio just to use it for depth conversion. So I hear you. If you don't have shear sonic and you have primary sonic, you can use the empirical equation to derive your shear sonic. But don't forget, there's inherent uncertainty on that because that equation is empirical. The feed and the basis from which that research was done is not Niger Delta, or it's not a chart basis. But that's what has been published in literature. So everybody that's writing book putting their this thing. Just bear in mind that will introduce serious uncertainty. But it's always good to start from somewhere. Thank you.
All right. So Taiwo Afuye, please unmute and then introduce yourself and ask your question quickly. Then we'll take that from Dr. George.
Oh, thanks, the moderator. Many thanks for this insightful presentation by my dog. The first question is, when comparing this deterministic and stochastic inversion in terms of computation time, what's the computation time like in these two? Because we're sampling the deterministic at 4 milliseconds and the stochastic at 1 millisecond. So what's the effect on the time computation? The second question is going to the modeling. When we're using, for an example, the Muro attributes into the modeling, definitely we want to do the seismic sampling into the 3D grid. How do we adjust the 3D grid vertical resolution? What would be your advice on the vertical resolution adjustments in order to make sure that it's not too noisy or it's not too smooth? Thank you, Doc.
Okay. Your first question is on. Hello.
It's on the time computation.
Okay, the time computation. Yes. Obviously, one is you're sampling 4 milliseconds. That one you're sampling 1 millisecond. And apart from sampling 1 millisecond, instead of sampling into horizons, when you're doing a deterministic, you just map the main horizons. Instead of sampling into horizon, you are able dividing the horizon into maybe 10, 50, 100, small layers. Definitely, the computation time is going to be that much. That's why if you look at the table where I put a comparison as a disadvantage, I talk about cost on cost. I won't be one to say, why is he talking about cost here? Because for stochastic, the runtime is that long. So you need a strong computer, a strong workstation, not just any workstation. If you use some kind of workstation, you can be running it for 24 hours. You will not get anywhere. Unlike the deterministic, you just run it in, let's say, 1 hour or 2 hours, you finish, depending on how big the data is. So you need very strong machine. But again, there's a lot of technology improvement. We are in big data era, so that shouldn't be a concern. All you need to do is tell your company to get you those high-end computers, and even yourself, I think you do that with $1,000, $1,500. You're going to get a high-end laptop workstation that you use in gaming that can do those kind of work. And then your second question is on what again? Can you remind me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Sorry, I was mute. So okay, the second question on the seismic resampling. For an example, the Muro as we want to implement into the 3D grid model. I mean, for a property model.
Okay. Once you have your inversion model of Muro, when it comes to resampling into your static model, it's not a problem, because the objective of the geologist or the geomodeler is what's going to drive how it's going to sample it. And you know how we do it. You divide your zones into layers, depending on whichever layer, how much layer that you want. And that's because you want to capture heterogeneity. And that must come from your well. So when after you've loaded your well, do all the analysis. For me, I like using a NTG to do that. So by the time you define your NTG, you get the smallest unit from that your NTG log. That smaller unit should form the basic of your layering. Otherwise, when you sample the Muro, they will be lost inside the grid. They'll be smeared if you don't capture that the finest heterogeneity from your NTG log.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Doc. So in this case, let me give you this input. By the time you're doing a cross plot, for an example, you've resampled the Muro, and you want to probably do a cross plot against your porosity. When you now look at the vertical grid resolution, and probably the one you try to increase the resolution as much as possible, and the one you not increase. So when you do that cross plot, I think the one you increase the resolution is going to be very noisy. So do we still want to pass it that way, or do you want to say, okay, not to have a good smooth distribution, I still probably maintain a kind of optimal vertical resolution in terms of layering to still go with the geology. I'm just thinking of.
No, don't forget that you have the Muro is from your inversion.
Oh yes.
And from your inversion too, you have other properties. You have porosity from inversion. I'm not interested in the one from for your model now.
Yeah.
So I can do a cross plot on that one and see whichever trend I want to see. But if I'm taking everything to static model now, you have your well in static model. You get me? You have the porosity log in static model. You sample it, you upscale it into your grid cell. And don't forget, even when that your porosity you're sampling into your grid cell, you don't want to smoothen out everything. So you want to capture the least heterogeneity. So like I said again, when you do your net and non-net, you will see the smallest unit of the non-net or smaller unit of the net within that reservoir. Your layering must capture it. So when your layering capture it, whatever your sample, whether porosity, whether your Muro, it's going to respect that layering. It has nothing to do with whether it's going to be noisy. No. If you're using Petra to build your static model, if there happen to be a bit of noise, there's a lot of algorithm or button you can just click. It will smoothen out and make this thing smooth.
Okay. Thanks, Doc. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Taiwo. And please, I'll just take the final question from Dr. George, and I want to raise that in 10 seconds or less, you introduce yourself and then ask your question so that we can round off this segment of the technical session.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bernard Ebere. I have just 10 seconds. I'm Chinoto George. The first question I would like to ask is, it's obvious that stochastic method offers more and than the deterministic and all other methods you mentioned. But at what point, at what situation would you avoid stochastic method for whatever reason? That is one question. I think I should stop there.
No, finish your question.
Okay, so I just wanted to make comments on or somebody that acts on spectral decomposition. I think you've captured it. And one key thing you mentioned is what time is done, post-stack and pre-stack. But the question I want to ask is, if you see attributes in Petrel, for example, or the DHI, sometimes in Kingdom and all that, how would you compare what those attributes offer as compared to doing a proper analysis with inversion, AVU, and all that query studies?
Thank you very much, Doc. Okay, the first one, when you may want to avoid stochastic. If the bed resolution is not a concern, you're looking at 100 feet sand, 200 feet sand, 400 feet sand thicknesses. You don't really need a stochastic inversion. It's going to resolve it. It's only when there are possibilities of thin beds, 30 feet, 20 feet, that you know that you can't resolve that on your via deterministic. That's when you cannot go for stochastic. Then when it comes to those other attributes, DHI, blah, blah, you can get from post-stack data. And you can see it normally in Petrel about, yeah, it's always a starting point for me. So you have to start from it. So it's not good to make things complicated. So you are doing analysis. First of all, you start by extracting those amplitude extractions, both volume and surfaces, on what you have on your post-stack data. You start with RMS, amplitude, sweetness, and I mean, if they're able to answer all your questions, you don't need to go to stochastic. You close it there. But in a scenario where they don't answer your question, then you now think of what else can I do? So you can now do a deep dive and start looking at more advanced techniques, even principal complex component analysis. And at this point, you would have already done some co-blending of those initial attributes. If you want more, you can now go to the advanced techniques. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bernard. I know I had said it's the final question, but I saw one that just came in, and I would want to keep you before you go and ask this question. When you were talking about critical geological and evaluation challenges, you mentioned one of it is the discrimination of residual versus live gas saturation. How do we discriminate that? Can you just quickly shed light on it?
Okay, I'll just show you a table.
All right.
So if you see this as a table, this plot, you see on the far angle stack, your residual, I mean the live gas is very far from where you have the wet gas. I mean where you have the wet sand, but residual is at the middle, closer to your brine. So normally that's why it's always good to do this kind of analysis, qualitative analysis. When you do this qualitative analysis, you would have been able to establish why you're having that kind of response.
Okay. All right. It's been an intensive and engaging session so far. I would like to say a big thank you to Dr. Ebere Bernard, who was the presenter on the topic Stochastic Inversion and Seismic Geomorphology for Reservoir Architecture and Little Fluid Prediction. Thank you so much, Dr. Bernard. Dr. Bernard is the lead geoscientist and rock physicist with CEPLAT. At this point, I would like to hand over to the YP lady, Fanny Kweze, to continue with the technical session. Thank you, Doc, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sheon, and thank you, Doc, for the wonderful presentation and also making yourself available to respond to all our questions. Before the closing remarks, sorry, I'm going to ask you one more last question.
Okay.
Which is, you said from the response, I think, to Dr. George's question, which you said, of course, if the attribute like RMS and sweetness can give you the answer you are looking for, that you don't need to go further to do this advanced QI stuff. I think I remember in one of your lecture in the past when you said something about not everything you see on your site I see hold on to that statement from you. Whenever I'm doing any project, that whatever you see on seismic is not always geological. So which means that you always need to test the whatever attribute you need to work on or work with. Now, if I want to rely just on my attribute response, is there a way I can actually test to find out that whatever the attribute is giving me is geologically inclined without necessarily going to PR and stuff?
Yes, because even on your normal post-stack attribute, conventional one, if you do surface extraction, so attribute extraction, you look out for geomorphology. You look for the morphology. So this does it look like this? If you have a funny shape, so which environment can you liken that to? Don't forget that what we're looking at is sand. It's sand that we're looking at. How can I have this kind of elephant shape? No sand is deposited that can look like an elephant shape. What that means that all that could be noise and artifact. And again, another thing you can do is you blend the attributes because these attributes are based on different physics. So when you blend it together and they give you something that looks like geology, then you know that they are real. When you blend them and they're not confusing you more, then you put the question mark on it. And again, don't forget the resolution of your seismic. If your seismic is very poor, maybe it was not well processed, there are a lot of noise and all that, you might be interpreting those noise. So you should be able to differentiate between what is an artifact and what is real. And again, another thing you could do is that once you generate all these attributes, those of them that you can relate to geologic properties like porosity, like volume of shape and all that. All I need to do is do a volume attribute generate a volume of that attribute, and then extract a log of that attribute and cross-plot it with what you know, what is in your well. You have a gamma ray, from gamma ray you get V shape. You have porosity. Do a cross plot with them. If you have a high correlation, anything from 65 to 90%, it means that that thing is geologic. It's making sense. But if you have a 0.2, 0.3, I mean, guy, you need to take elsewhere for your answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. And the last one is for like onshore onshore data, how realistic in getting a good response for QI, an onshore data.
Okay, to be honest with all of us, geology, as by way of what we are interpreting, has no bias to onshore or offshore. Where we call onshore now in the subsurface could be offshore in the past. That's why we tie our observations to the positional environment, and that's how we do geomorphology. You can have drill a well in Sapele, or you can drill a well in Port Harcourt, and that way we intersect the deep water deposits. The only thing I know is with respect to acquisition. In offshore acquisition, it's pretty simple and straightforward. There are a lot of minimal interference to signal travels and all that, because your signal just travels through the water to the seabed and go boom, and you get very beautiful reflectivity, well resolved seismic. While onshore, because you are battling with weathering low velocity weathering layers, you're battling with acquisition geometry based on the fact that probably you have a river somewhere, you want to avoid the river. You are battling with built up areas, they built, maybe you're acquiring something across Lagos now, there are people's houses. So you cannot maintain those geometry. So many a time we use them, even though we plan them on paper, that, okay, this is the inline, this is the cross line. Physically, it's not possible to achieve that. So you have to take a total spat to lay your cables. But when the guys go to process it in the processing center, they will process that data as if the data was the way it was on the paper. So all this will introduce errors here and there, and uncertainties. So that may impact your result. But then by and large, that is why we are geoscientists. We're still in position to make out something meaningful from that data set so that decisions can be made and for companies to spend money and expect big profits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Joshua. Your last response was actually the main reason why I asked that question, in terms of acquisition and stuff. So that was actually the main reason why I asked the question. Thank you so much, Doc, and we believe that, of course, whenever we call on you, you always answer us. Even if you don't answer, know where to go and drag. Thank you so much. And please, for everyone here present, please. NAPE conference is fast approaching, and NAPE has given the young professionals a discount of 10K. Instead of 45,000, young professionals will be paying 10,000. Please, if you're interested in attending NAPE conference, you can reach out to me anytime. The forms are on our social media platform. You register and pay 10K. In fact, 30th of this month is the deadline for early bird, which means that after 30th of September, it might increase to the usual amount, 45,000. Please, you have if you can't be at the hotel, you can actually join virtually. So I want to encourage us to leverage on this opportunity. Of course, our conference program will be coming out very soon. And I want to give out an expo that Dr. Bernard Ebere is one of our facilitators as well at the conference. So please leverage on this opportunity and register. Thank you very much, and see you at the conference. And have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, YP lead and the executive.
Thank you.